All right, guys, we are now live for another weekly episode of NOMBERG Law Live, as we have been the last couple of years. Tuesdays at 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. Interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And gosh, we are in for a treat today. We've got Birmingham based T. Marie King with us this morning. Good morning, T. Marie. How are you?
I'm good.
Good, good. I'm so glad to see you and that you have some time for us. You're so busy in the community doing some awesome things. And for those of you who don't know T. Marie, you haven't been looking because she's everywhere doing some good things. She's a community consultant, an activist, a speaker, an educator, a trainer, just trying to push forward community involvement, community education, whether it's about race relations, whether it's about religious tolerance, whatever it is, it's helping society to become more educated and pushing forward. And before I butcher even further a little bit about T. Marie, if you would just take a second or two and tell us more about yourself and a little of your background.
Absolutely. Definitely thank you so much for having me on this morning. For me, I always tell people my background is actually film and video production is actually my background. So I say that's my passion work. That's what I'm really passionate about. But a few years back, I was chosen to participate in the 2015 commemorative 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March. And I say that's when I discovered my purpose work. And so after that, we did all 5 days. We marched from Selma to Montgomery, capital. And leaving that experience, I was like, I have to do something with this. I cannot not do anything with this. And so I started kind of going around having conversations, panels about race, but utilizing unique ways to have the conversation because a lot of people don't want to get into, that's a difficult conversation. I don't want to talk about race. That's hard. But I said, there's got to be an easy way to engage it. So I started doing conversations where we looked at race through film clips, or we would look at race through photography or visual arts. My favorite one was we looked at race through music videos and just had a robust conversation that people actually left feeling empowered to have more conversations and not like, oh my God, this is so daunting. And so from there, I started doing workshops and trainings with organizations. I've worked with everybody from the National Network of Safe Communities, with our Birmingham Police Department, new recruits, to schools, to kids camps, to corporations, and just helping people feel more equipped to have these conversations, especially in the time that we're in.
It really seems that through the arts, whatever medium it may be, that seems to be, I'll call it an icebreaker or a
Yeah.
common theme that allows people to participate, to listen, to communicate. And I know this past week, you were part of the annual Sidewalk Film Festival, which Birmingham is so proud of and
Yeah.
should be here in town. Through the pandemic and what's going on in the world, they pivoted. So it wasn't downtown, it was virtual. It was, uh, tell us a little bit about where it was held this year and how you participated in what you did.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was glad to. I've been volunteering with Sidewalk off and on for some years, but this year was different. I came on as a programmer for the Black Lens film trek, and so with the pandemic, it made it very unique in how we had to figure out how to get people together. So some of it, like you said, was virtual, and then we used the drive-in out in Leeds, the
Mhm.
drive-in movie theater. So being able to participate in something that's kind of old school,
Yeah.
expose look, it was great seeing little kids sitting on top of their parents' trucks and vans,
I bet.
watching
I bet.
movies. But everybody was physically distant, had a great time. And it was hot a few days, but it was a good time. It was a real good time.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Black Lens group of movies and discussions that you held.
Absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to do this year was kind of really show a robust perspectives of Black life. And sometimes sometimes I think in media we see only one thing, And I'm like, Black people are not monolithic. We have all different types of experiences that are unique to just anybody, but sometimes they are not actually covered and portrayed. But also we're in the midst of uprising in our community, globally, really, but definitely in this nation, where I didn't want to miss that opportunity either. So films like The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, I wanted in there. Speak Truth to Power, the Barbara Lee story. She's a congresswoman out in California. Down to, there was a little kid who shot a little superhero-esque film, but it's like showing all those stories that kind of speak to this time of we're dealing with unrest, putting yourself out there to speak for your community and represent your community. Two, it's okay to have fun and laugh sometimes, even in the midst of a lot going on.
And were there discussions held before or after some of the films?
There were not like we would normally do, unfortunately, due to what's going on, but there were some interviews that one of the programmers did with some of the filmmakers to kind of get their feedback on, why they chose to do that film, what they wanted the audience to get out of. And those I believe, are on the Sidewalks website.
Well, very good. I know that was an important component to Sidewalk, not just this year, but any year that they're able to feature different viewpoints, different ways of life, different cultures, etc.
Absolutely.
But where do you go now, T. Marie? The Sidewalk is over for the year from the public standpoint. I know it's year round work, but you don't just sit around the house and you're out and about. Given the culture, given the temperament and the temperature of the United States, and probably worldwide right now, just everybody's on edge. We're in the middle of what are we in our sixth, almost seventh month of a pandemic that none of us have lived through. We've got an election coming up in the next couple of months. Some say one of the most important elections in probably at least the last 50 years, if not much. The world is just so on edge right now, and maybe more so than during mine or your lifetimes. How do you engage people in conversations? Because I'll give you an example. One of the best and worst of social media to me is Twitter. I love getting my news and pieces of information about sports that I love so much and what's going on in different areas of my interests. And that's great for that. Yeah. But it can be such a hate-filled social media platform where anybody is a warrior behind their account, and they just spew off such venom. And I guess my question, and I know you're active on social media, how do you communicate with people that, or do you, when you see some of that venom coming out that is just so hate-filled at times?
What's so sad is that you do have people that have found a way of hiding behind their keyboards, what we call them trolls, and for me, I choose not to engage in that. I'll more so interact with the folks that I may see being attacked and just letting them know, hey, I hear your point. Is there something I can help you with? Is, something you need more information on? It's those folks that want to, I think, keep the fire burning per se. It's like, I'm not going to waste my time with you. But those who I see are trying to learn and trying to educate themselves and looking for answers, those are the folks I usually try to reach out to and catch.
It seems like if somebody is going to attack another person for whatever their beliefs may be, just for example, just yesterday, you may have seen in the news, Coach Nick Saban and the Alabama football team made a deliberate march to the schoolhouse door and gave some very passionate speeches. And I think, at least from my perspective, as time moves on, that's going to become a very important event, not just in our state, but maybe nationally, given the prominence of Coach Saban and the importance to many, many people of the football team, and particularly given the governor Wallace's stand from so many decades ago. I just thought it was so historic. But no matter if you love the football team or not, there were so many hate-filled comments in the social media posts. Yeah. And I've always been of the belief, if you don't give the other person the platform to spew the hate. If you don't engage it, maybe sometimes it won't flame the passions that they have. But on the other hand, hearing both sides is always very important.
Yeah.
And I guess let me ask you from this: what did we learn from the events that occurred downtown at Lynn Park when the monument was finally taken down? Those couple of days of protesting, a little bit of looting and so forth that was going on. What are some things that you learned, or maybe you've communicated with others, that of importance from that event here in Birmingham?
I would say, I won't necessarily say something I learned. I would say something I realized was
Mhm.
that we have to be more strategic. I think nothing is wrong with protesting, nothing is wrong with marching, nothing is wrong with even people being antagonistic and sharing their views, because in some way they feel like I'm missing out or something is being taken away from me. And I think we should honor that to hear exactly what they're saying, because there may in there, in the midst of all those emotions, it may be some truth and something we actually may need to look at. But I would like to see more strategic planning. So if we're going to remove a monument, what is it about and what are we addressing? And have more of a collective approach towards, we saw that in the civil rights movement. Dr. King, Congressman John Lewis, who was just John Lewis, SNCC organizer at the time. They weren't just marching to march. It wasn't like, okay, it's Monday, let's go
Right,
march today. It
right.
was, no, we're responding to something specific that we want change and shifted in our community. And so I would like to see us overall as community members, while we're protesting, what are our demands? What are we asking for? And there may be a national ask, but there also may be individual community and city asks. We're seeing a lot of frustration with people around what's been happening in our police departments and the killing of a Black man. I mean, you just had Jacob Blake, shot in the back 7 times. There's clearly something here that needs to be addressed. And I think people taking the time to educate themselves as they're watching from a distance, and not getting upset when you hear somebody say, well, we want the police defunded. Okay, well, what does that actually mean? Are people asking for police to be done away with? Some are. There are a demographic of people that we don't need them, get rid of them. But then there's some that saying, no, we're not saying get rid of police. What we're saying is reallocate those funds and let's make sure they're getting the proper training they need. Let's maybe hire some community navigators that work with the police that can come in and help kind of diffuse situations. So I think a lot of it is based, us having what it is that we want shifted, educating ourselves, and then actually acting on it.
The events that took place in Birmingham a few months ago only lasted a day or two, maybe 3 days. I remember going into the weekend when things were starting to build, and there were rumors of even the Klan being downtown, and that never materialized. But all in all, we did not see the violence and the destruction of property and the injuries to individuals on a larger scale like you're seeing in many other parts of the country, like right now in Portland or
Right.
Seattle, and those continue to go on. And I'm not asking you to be able to explain all of why it's still going on in Seattle or Portland, but more so from an observer and with your experience, how are cities like Birmingham and some of the other cities, I don't know if they're mainly in the South or not, I have not studied that much, how are they able to deal with those things in a little bit easier way? I don't think that's the right term, but with less conflict, with less continual outward unrest that we see. I'm not saying it's gone away,
Mhm.
but I don't even know if I'm asking you the right way. What I'm wanting to discuss. Why is it still going on in Portland or in other cities, but it's not still going on from a protest and violence standpoint in our city or in other cities where it has been?
Um, I think it's a few reasons. One, I think the reason we still see it in other communities, I think people are just mad. I think this new generation that's out, they're pissed off. We're tired of this. Our grandparents dealt with this. Why are we still having these same conversations? And that anger and frustration of, we're just going to keep showing up until they see us, until they respond. I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of communities. And when you go from, you know, being shocked about Ahmaud Arbery earlier in the year, to the frustration of Breonna Taylor, to George Floyd, and everybody being, because of us being in the midst of a pandemic, being frozen almost. We're at home and watching what happened with George Floyd. It's like, are you serious? Like, are we still dealing with this? To watching Jacob Blake being shot 7 times in front of his kids. And I think folks are just frustrated. I think it's just being channeled differently in different communities. I do believe that same level of frustration and anger is here and in the South. I just think a lot of times, because of how we have modeled in history over time, that how we kind of go about it is a little differently, not as vocal outwardly, not marching, protesting, which, I can easily err on, maybe we should see more marching and protesting in Birmingham. Because in my travels, when people find out I'm from Birmingham, they're always asking, well, what is Birmingham doing? How is Birmingham responding? So, people always look to us to kind of see how we're doing it. But I think the frustration is here. I think some people are just leaning towards navigating it differently. But I kind of support both exercises of frustration.
And we all know the history of the way the South developed over the last 100 and some odd years. And I've often heard, and I don't know if this is a correct way to think or the way to see things, is I've often heard from friends and colleagues who are not from the Deep South, who have said, well, y'all, meaning the South, y'all dealt with this for so long. You've done, you've gone through, you've led the way, so to speak, on the problems that were there, and you're fixing it or have fixed it. And we haven't done that in the Northeast, or we've not dealt with this in the past in the West. So we don't know how to deal with it. And that makes me a little uncomfortable sometimes. What's your response if you were to be told that, well, you guys, y'all in the South, y'all have already dealt with all of this, so things must be a lot better here, race-wise, religious-wise, other tolerances-wise. That doesn't make me necessarily feel very comfortable, but what's your response if you hear that kind of thing? I don't know if you've heard that before.
And some version of that, I think there is this idea of, because so much of what happened in the South was filmed, and you see it in February, you see it in the Eyes on the Prize videos, what happened in Montgomery, Selma, Birmingham, and they think, oh, y'all are so past that, and it's like, well, things have improved, but there's still improvements that need to be made. We haven't solved anything, actually. You're talking about in the 60s, we got the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, that wasn't that long ago. Fair Housing Act in the early 70s, that wasn't that long ago. So I think sometimes people think, oh, that was done and we've moved past it. No, we still have other systemic issues that we're having to address. Now, as for these other communities, I think, South side of Chicago may disagree that the issue is not there. I have Indigenous and First Nations friends out West that are still fighting for their land and issues they're dealing with. So I think what happens is a lot of times people are in their bubbles, and because they're not experiencing or seeing certain things, it doesn't exist. That must not be our problem. And, I always tell people the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Right. Just because you're not aware of it doesn't mean that it's not taking place.
Yeah, it's too easy to stick your head in the proverbial sand and just, oh, it'll go away, or doesn't affect me. And then what I think compounds, and you've already hit on this, what compounds what's going on in our country right now is the fact that we're in a pandemic. We've been in quarantine, or had been in quarantine, for many months. So people are fixed on their devices, on their phones. And it's just, the more you watch videos and things, the more it inflames passions.
Yeah,
And then you got to get that passion and that emotion out. But a lot of times it's misguided, or it's not focused in the areas that's helpful. It's more destructive.
absolutely.
And I know that's what makes your work and your colleagues' work even more difficult from an already difficult standpoint.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, this is September 1st, believe it or not. I can't believe this is
I know.
we're already starting the ninth month of the worst year, but I want to remain optimistic.
Right.
I want to look forward to the future. And I do, before I get to my question, I need to reintroduce and reset. My guest is T. Marie King. She's here in Birmingham. She's an activist, an educator, a trainer, a speaker, and most importantly, she is out there and trying to just reach people to have conversation. And frankly, I think it's those conversations that you may not win them over in the first time you talk to them. You may not win them over in the 10th time, but they hear you and they see you and they know that you're there and you're trying to promote the betterment of society. And that's what this is all about. So back to my question. We're heading into the last 4 months of the year. Hopefully we're going to find a vaccine. Hopefully we're going to find a way for us to get back into I'll call it the new normal, whatever that looks like in the future. What are you going to be doing? What's planned for continuing to educate people of Birmingham or wherever it is that you may be, whether it's virtually like we are now, or actually getting on a plane and
Yeah.
headed somewhere? What's going on for you?
I'm definitely continuing the conversation. I've been doing a lot of workshops. I think since June, I may have done close to 30 workshops and or virtual panels. So
Wow.
it's been very busy.
Ooh, I'm lucky that you had some time for us today. So thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I want to continue to push people, but also equip people in how to have these hard conversations. Because you and I can have this conversation, but I want other folks like have this with your kids. Which was so important with me of partnering with the Jewish day school. And let's talk about how you have this conversation with your little children. They're not too small to start engaging in conversations about race. I've worked with corporations who say, we're trying to figure out how to get a pipeline of, African American and Hispanic applicants. Okay, let's have that conversation. What are you doing now? I'm looking forward to when we can be in space. I've been doing civil rights tours with organizations, so I'm looking forward to getting back to that. And hopefully this moment that we're in this pandemic, when things clear up, hopefully it'll spark people to want to come to Birmingham, to want to visit Montgomery, Selma, Jackson, Mississippi, all these places, Memphis, Tennessee, where key things happen to learn more about the history of our community and of our nation. So I'll continue to do that work. Probably still some on virtual, which virtual is not necessarily my favorite, but I love the in-person interaction. But I'm looking forward to continuously doing that. This is what I've spent the past few years really studying this work around restorative justice, around empowering people. Empathy is so important. I think it's a muscle that we don't exercise enough. It's easy to disassociate yourself if you're not looking through an empathetic lens. So my goal is to continue to do the work, be out there. And, one of my things is I want to help people be a custodian of how they think. And we know what custodians do. They come in and they clean up, right? And so I think we have to take on that same charge of cleaning up our own thinking. All the biases that we have, the bad stuff, the things that we pick up, the stuff that media gives us, social media gives us, that's not always accurate, but is more of somebody's opinion versus their experience. But making sure that we don't take those things on as fact and start operating with people as such.
It is. It's too easy to buy into the agenda of whether it's a media company. We all know that there's some of the media companies are far on one side and some are far on the other side, no matter that they tell you that they're in the middle. A lot of times, and it depends on who the individuals are who are talking.
Right.
But by not talking, by not communicating, by not being empathetic, like you said, That's how society stays stagnant and is
Absolutely.
harmful. T. Marie,
Absolutely.
if folks want to reach out to you, I put your link to your website, if that's okay. I put
Yes.
that in there in the show notes. But are there, I guess I have two questions, and we're getting close toward the end of our
Mhm.
conversation. My first question is, if people, parents, for example, want to start having conversations with their children in the home and others who are around them, where are some resource materials? Where can people go, either virtually or physically, if they're in the Birmingham area? Where can people get some materials to start this conversation?
I definitely think, books are a great way. There's a book called Ghost Boys that I have been recommending to families to get and read with their children. It's,
Right.
probably middle school age up. I would say a mature fifth grader could read and understand this book. I have a few kids in my repertoire that I tell them about books, and if they like it, then I'm like, okay, we're good. But
This
it's
the book
called,
by Jewel Parker Rhodes.
it is, it is.
Okay, I found it and I'm going to put a copy. I'm going to put the link in the notes
Yes,
in
please
case
get
folks
that
want to
book.
find that.
Yeah, it's a great book. It is very timely. And in a nutshell, just so nobody is shocked, it's about a young boy who is killed by the police, but he doesn't cross over. He's actually still around, and his ghost boy guide is Emmett Till, and
Oh, wow.
explaining what he's experiencing.
Mhm.
Um, and only one person can see this ghost boy, and it's the police officer's daughter that killed him. And so it follows kind of their relationship and his adjustment. But at the end of the book, the author did such an amazing thing where she has discussion questions that you can go through with your kids. So I think Ghost Boys is great. One of my favorite films is Zootopia, that I think it deals with bias and difference in such a easy, digestible way for families to sit down and begin that conversation. And if you got little ones, very little ones, Sesame Street has actually been doing some
Mhm.
good things around race and difference. So I would say check those out definitely. But when things open back up, especially if you're in the Birmingham area, you know, Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, and or the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery are definitely places you should visit with your families.
I on the weekends, if the weather permits, I live in Forest Park, not far from downtown. I get
Okay.
on my bike and I ride all through the downtown footprint,
Yeah.
whether it's all the way to 65 or all the way back to Elton Stevens Parkway. And I ride right through that area where the 16th Street Church and the
Mhm.
Civil Rights Institute. And I always stop at a different monument just to educate myself.
Yeah.
And it truly is for people who don't know, if you've never either virtually or actually been to these facilities, they're amazing. The amount of information that you can digest just being in the park itself, it's so
Right.
powerful when you go through certain parts of there to educate yourself. But I guess my question to you is, T. Marie, if I were to go, if I had never been to the Civil Rights Institute, there's so much material there. It's hard to take it all
Yeah.
in one thing. But are there particular areas to concentrate on a first time visitor maybe should go to or to concentrate on?
I think if you go into the Institute, when you first come in, there's a film that you watch, which does a good job of kind of setting the groundwork of the city. But when you first come in, it shows the disparities in church, social life, and education. And I think in that first, I say first, what, 15, 20 steps that you take in going into actual museum, to me, I think some of those things are so key to really take in and understand that this was a systematic thing that was done, excuse me, to keep us separate from one another. And that was accomplished through legal segregation. So I think that front part of the museum is very key. But also, once you make it towards the back, the March on Washington and why that was so important, that I think people need to tap into also.
It truly is not a one day learn it all, read it all event. Location. It's a whole weekend. It could be a whole week. if
Absolutely.
you incorporate the park, if you incorporate the church and everything that's around there. T. Marie, thank you for such an educational and important conversation. And I'm going to give
Absolutely.
you the last word. And I've heard you say this before, that we should do better. We can do better. We need to do better. What does that mean to you?
That means to me, we have an opportunity to shift some things. I found this quote by Abraham Lincoln that I've just fallen in love with. And it said, I don't like that man. I must get to know him. And I think that's the time that we're in now. It's a lot of things we don't understand. It's a lot of communities that we haven't been proximate to understand their issues, their plight, their challenges, the struggles that they're going through. And sometimes it surfaces in our behavior as we don't like people or what they're doing or how they're responding. And I think we need to take that charge for Abraham Lincoln and say, I must get to know that man. So let's take the time to be empathetic and get to know what other people are dealing with so that we can tap in, lean in, or utilize our access and resources to help change it for all.
Well, thank you.
You're
Gosh,
welcome.
T. Marie, this has been such an outstanding conversation for me. I want to thank you for educating, for doing what you're doing, and I hope you continue on your path of just being there for so many people. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And guys, as I try to do every Tuesday, interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And right now, T. Marie really fits that bill. And if you don't know her, go read about her, go listen to her interviews and conversations, and then go try to attend a seminar or someplace where she's speaking. I can't say enough good things. You
Thank you.
guys have a great rest of your week. Be safe.